The first time my brother tried to snatch the watch off my father's dresser, I slapped his hand so hard the whole room went silent. That was the moment everything started to crack. We were all standing in my dad's bedroom the morning after his memorial service, still wearing black, still carrying flowers people had dropped off the night before, and still pretending we were the kind of family who could stand in the same room without tearing each other apart. The old watch sat in the center of the dresser like it had always belonged there. Dull silver, scratched glass, cracked leather band. The kind of watch most people would have called junk. But my father had worn that watch every single day of my life. Even when the battery died, he kept it on his wrist. Even when the face stopped ticking, he still checked it like it knew more than he did. Now my brother Troy was reaching for it like it was gold. "Back off, Maya," he said, his jaw tight. "Dad's watch should go to me." I laughed before I could stop myself. Not because it was funny, but because grief makes people insane in the worst possible ways. To you? Based on what? Because you're suddenly acting like you cared? His wife, Dana, folded her arms and stepped closer to him, like she was ready for a fight she didn't belong in. My Aunt Linda stood near the doorway, pretending to look hurt, but really she was watching the room like a judge waiting for the final argument. My stepmother, Cheryl, sat in Dad's old chair with her purse clutched in both hands. Eyes dry, face stiff, already tired of everybody. "This watch was his," Troy said. "And if there's anything valuable inside it, it belongs to the family." There it was. Not his memory. Not the one thing he always wore. Not the watch that meant something to him. Valuable. That was my family in a single word. I looked at the watch again. It was heavier than it looked, and the clasp had always been a little loose. A strange thought passed through me, one I didn't understand until later. My father had never once taken it off in front of us, not even to shower, not even in the hospital when he was weak and tired and already halfway gone. "Give me the watch," Troy said again. "No." He stepped toward me, and I swear if Cheryl hadn't spoken up, he might have grabbed my arm. "Enough," she said sharply. "Your father's not even cold yet." That should have shut everybody up. It didn't. Because the second she said it, Linda turned on her. "Don't you start acting holy now. You were in that room every day before he passed away, whispering in his ear about accounts and papers." Cheryl's face changed. Just for a second. A tiny flicker. But I saw it. And so did Troy. The room got thinner after that. "Airless? Dangerous? What accounts?" I asked. Nobody answered me. That was the first lie. It wouldn't be the last. My father, Walter, had been the kind of man who fixed everything with his hands. He worked at the municipal garage for 38 years, drove the same faded blue truck for the last 12, and kept every receipt in neat little envelopes tied with rubber bands. He was not a rich man, not even close, but people in our town respected him because he had a way of showing up when it mattered. If your car broke down in the rain, he came. If your kitchen pipe burst, he knew a guy. If you needed someone to tell you the truth even when it stung, he did that too. He was also the kind of father who didn't say "I love you" often, but would put gas in your car before winter and leave a 20 folded inside your glove box. He wasn't perfect. He was stubborn, private, and hard to read. After my mom passed when I was 14, he shut pieces of himself away that none of us could ever fully reach. 3 years later, he married Cheryl. Troy liked Cheryl from the start. He liked the way she laughed at his jokes and made excuses for him. He liked being treated like the golden child, which he always had been, though not because Dad wanted it that way. Troy was my older brother, the handsome one, the charming one, the one who could talk himself out of trouble with a smile. I was the younger daughter, the quieter one, the one Dad trusted with his tax papers and his kitchen keys and every little thing he didn't trust the rest of the family with. Cheryl had one daughter from a previous marriage, Paige, who was a year younger than me and always acted like she had inherited the right to every room she entered. Paige and Troy got along beautifully, which should have told me something. People who loved being right usually found each other. By the time Dad got sick, the house had already turned into a place where you could feel tension in the walls. Cheryl complained about money. Troy complained about unfairness. Paige complained about me. Linda complained about everything and everyone. Dad mostly said nothing. Then, 2 months before he passed, he started asking me to help him with something. It began with the watch. He called me into the garage one evening while the sky outside turned orange and the air smelled like oil and cut grass. He sat on his workbench stool with the watch in his palm, staring at it like he was listening to it. "Can you open this for me?" he asked. I looked at him. "The back?" He nodded. I found a tiny screwdriver in his tool tray and carefully pried the case open. I expected dust, maybe a dead battery, maybe rust. Instead, I found something folded inside the back plate, tucked so tightly I almost missed it. A tiny piece of paper. My breath caught. "Dad, what is this?" He closed his hand over mine before I could unfold it. His fingers were rough, warm, and shaking a little. "Not now," he said. "Just keep that in mind." "Keep what in mind?" He looked at me for a long second, and I saw something I had not seen in him before. Fear. Not of pain, not of being old. Fear of people. "After I'm gone," he said quietly. "Don't let them start dividing things before they know what's mine." I remember laughing a little then because I thought he was talking about the garage, maybe some tools, maybe some old truck part. "Who's dividing what?" He didn't answer. He just asked me to put the watch back together and keep it safe. I wish I had asked more questions. I wish I had pried open that paper then and there. But Dad was already tired, and when a father says something in that low, serious voice, you do what he asks and trust there's a reason. 2 months later, he was gone. The funeral was packed. The house was full, and people kept saying things like, "He was a good man," and "He wouldn't want you all to fight." That last one made me want to scream because clearly none of those people had ever met my family at a moment of stress. The day after the service was the first real explosion. We had gathered in the bedroom because Cheryl insisted everything important was in Dad's room, and because Troy had already gone through the desk drawers in the living room and started pulling out envelopes. Paige was on her phone half the time, pretending she was documenting the process, and Linda kept saying she'd known for years this family needed a lawyer. At one point, Troy held up a folder and announced, "There's no will in here. Then maybe stop digging through his stuff like a raccoon." I snapped. "Funny coming from you," he said. "You always acted like you were the special one." I almost told him Dad had trusted me more than him, but I swallowed it, because that was the second lie of the day. Troy liked to think our father had favored me. He hadn't. Dad had simply relied on the child who didn't ask for applause in return. Cheryl crossed the room, opened the top dresser drawer, and froze. "What?" Paige said. Cheryl reached in slowly and pulled out the watch. That was when Troy lunged forward. "Give me that." "Why?" I asked. "Because it's mine," he said. "It's not yours. It's family property. It's Dad's watch. And he's gone," Troy fired back. "So now it's ours to sort out." That was when I slapped his hand. Not proud of it. Not elegant. Just instinct. He stared at me like I'd betrayed some secret agreement that existed only in his head. Dana stepped between us, face tight with outrage. "This is exactly why Dad kept things private," I said. "You're not even sad. You're just circling." Troy pointed at me. "Don't talk to me like I'm some thief." The room went completely still, because now everybody heard it. Thief. Nobody said the word aloud, but it was there, hanging in the air. Cheryl stood very still, the watch cupped in her palm. Her voice came out light, too light. "Maybe everyone should calm down." "Why are you holding it?" I asked her. "I found it. In his drawer." "Yes." "Why were you in his drawer?" She blinked. Just once. And I knew. Not the whole truth, not yet, but enough to understand that she'd been in that room before we got there, before the rest of us ever walked in, and she had already looked for something. "Where's the will?" I asked. Cheryl's expression went blank. There wasn't one. Dad's lawyer's number was still in my phone from when he had updated his insurance forms, so that afternoon I called. The office said the reading was scheduled for the next day. That should have settled things. It didn't, because by then the watch was missing. I noticed it first. I had been sitting alone in the kitchen making coffee I didn't want. When I reached for the tray Cheryl had set on the counter and saw the little velvet box open and empty, I felt my stomach drop. I went straight to the living room. "Who took the watch?" No one answered. Troy shrugged like I was accusing him of stealing a spoon. How would I know? You wanted it yesterday. So did you. Not like that. Cheryl walked in from the hall with a carton of paperwork in her arms. What's going on now? The watch is gone. Linda pointed at her immediately. Why are you carrying my brother's files? Cheryl snapped back. Because somebody has to organize this mess. That was when I saw the paperclip on the floor near her shoe. Small, silver, bent. It looked exactly like the kind my father used to pin notes together. And then something happened that made my skin go cold. Paige, who had been leaning against the wall, pretending not to care, looked directly at Cheryl and said, You said the key was in the watch. Kay? The room erupted. Key to what? Troy barked. What key? Linda shot back. Cheryl's head turned slowly toward Paige. Paige immediately looked down, but it was too late. The word had landed. I turned to Cheryl. What key? She kept her voice level. Paige doesn't know what she's talking about. Paige lifted her chin. I know enough. Cheryl's face sharpened. Do you? Troy looked between them, eyes narrowing. Okay. Somebody better start explaining. Nobody did. That evening, after everybody had left the house except me, I went upstairs to Dad's room and searched it myself. I checked under the mattress, in the nightstand, behind the framed picture of my mom on his dresser, inside the work boots lined neatly by the closet, even in the pocket of the old jacket he always wore to the garage. Nothing. Then I noticed something odd about the watch box. The bottom felt thicker than it should have. I flipped it over, ran my nails across the seam, and found a tiny slit along the edge. My fingers shook as I worked it open. Inside was a folded scrap of paper no bigger than a postage stamp. 3 words. Westfield Lockbox. I stared at them for a long time. Westfield was the old bank on Cedar Street. I knew because Dad used to take me there as a kid to cash savings bonds, and because the teller once gave me a lollipop when I was 6. I also knew because I had seen Cheryl there twice in the past month. I had not meant to follow her the first time. I just happened to be driving home early from work when I saw her silver SUV parked in front of the bank with the engine running. The second time, I had been waiting at a light and saw her go inside carrying a black folder. At the time, I told myself it was none of my business. Now I knew better. The next morning I went to the bank before it opened and waited in my car until the doors unlocked. I had Dad's death certificate, his old key ring, and enough anxiety to power a small city. The manager was a polite man in a brown tie who asked careful questions and led me to a private room after I explained who I was. When he brought out the box, my hands almost gave out. Inside was a stack of sealed envelopes, a small envelope labeled For Maya, and a thin leather journal. Under the envelope sat one more item, the original backplate from Dad's watch, as if he had removed it on purpose and hidden the watch's heart in pieces. I opened the envelope marked For Maya first. My father's handwriting covered the page in dark blue ink. The letters slanted slightly to the right like they were in a hurry. Maya, if you're reading this, then I'm gone or too weak to speak plainly. Either way, I need you to listen carefully and not trust the noise around you. The watch was never the inheritance. It was the message. I hid this so no one could take it before I was ready. There are records in the journal. Read everything before you say a word to anyone. Do not let Cheryl handle my papers. Do not let Troy talk you out of this. And if anyone tells you I changed my mind about the house, check the deed at the county office. I wanted to tell you sooner. I didn't, because I was trying to protect what's left of this family. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was too late. Whatever happens, remember this. I chose you because you tell the truth, even when it costs you something. There is one thing I regret. I should have protected you better after your mother passed. Love, Dad. I had to sit down. The room blurred at the edges, and I read the letter 3 times before I could trust that it was real. My mother. My father regretting something. Cheryl keeping papers away from us. The deed. The house. None of it made sense yet, but I knew one thing for certain. My father had been trying to warn me. The journal was even worse. Page after page of dates, numbers, copies of checks, notes about conversations, and careful little observations in Dad's slanted handwriting. He had recorded everything. Not just money, behavior, visits. Dates Cheryl had pressured him about updating things. The afternoon, Troy asked if the house would be sold. The day Paige told him family should keep things simple. And then the line that made my hands start shaking so hard I nearly dropped the book. I believe Cheryl has been moving money from the account used for house repairs. I kept reading. There were photographs tucked between the pages. One showed Cheryl leaving the bank with a folder. Another showed Troy standing on the front porch with a man I didn't know. There were copies of checks made out to cash. There were notes about a safe deposit box. And near the back, there was a page with the words I never expected to see. The real inheritance is not the money. It is the proof. My throat tightened. Proof of what? Then I found the answer, and it made me feel cold all the way through. There had been no family fund at all, at least not in the way Cheryl had been presenting it. Dad had quietly set aside money over the years for two things: repairs to the house and a scholarship he wanted to establish in my mother's name. Cheryl had been pushing him to combine everything so she could help manage the estate. But the journal showed she had already started pulling money from the repair account for herself. Not enough to make a giant scene. Enough to hope no one noticed. And Troy? Troy had not just known. He had helped her. There it was in black and white. Dad had written it the way only a disappointed parent can write something. Measured, devastating, and somehow even sadder because he was trying so hard not to be cruel. Troy believes he is helping. He is not. He is being used. I sat there in the bank room with my father's final words in my lap, and I cried so hard I had to press my fist against my mouth to keep from making a sound. Because I understood something then. He had not hidden the watch to create drama. He had hidden it because he knew his own family was already dividing his life before he was gone. When I left the bank, my first instinct was to call Troy. Instead, I called the lawyer. Mr. Harlan was an older man with thick glasses and a face that never changed expression, which made him the perfect person to hear bad news. I met him at his office an hour later with the journal, the letters, and copies of the bank statements I had requested. He read everything twice. Then he looked up and said, "Your father was trying to prevent a very ugly situation. That's putting it lightly." He tapped the journal. "This is enough to pause informal distribution. We need to verify the house deed and review all accounts immediately. If what your father wrote is accurate, there may be financial misconduct." The words felt too big for the room. "Can you prove it?" I asked. He adjusted his glasses. "We can start." That night I didn't sleep. I kept hearing my father's voice in my head, calm and tired and full of warning. I kept seeing Cheryl's face when Paige mentioned the key. I kept remembering Troy in the bedroom, not grieving, just calculating. By morning, I had a plan. I texted everyone to meet at the house at noon. I told them Mr. Harlan needed all family members present for the estate review. I did not mention the watch, the journal, or the bank box. By the time they arrived, Cheryl had already put on her best expression of offended innocence. Troy came in with Dana, both of them acting like they were doing me a favor by showing up. Linda arrived with her arms full of attitude and a legal pad. Paige sat in the corner with her phone pointed at the floor, recording nothing and pretending she was just bored. Mr. Harlan opened his briefcase and spread out the papers. The room immediately became serious. "Before we begin," he said, "I want everyone to understand that any attempt to remove or conceal property after a death can create legal issues." Troy smirked. "We're just trying to honor Dad." "No," I said quietly. "You're trying to divide him." That shut the room down. Mr. Harlan looked at me. I gave him the slightest nod. He cleared his throat. "The county deed confirms that the house was left in trust." Cheryl sat upright. "A trust? That's impossible." "It is very possible," he said. "And according to these records, it names Maya as the trustee." The sound Cheryl made was not quite a gasp and not quite a laugh. "What?" Troy said. "That means, Mr. Harlan continued, "the property cannot be sold or transferred without proper legal review. Furthermore, there are discrepancies in the household repair account and related withdrawals." Cheryl's face drained of color. Troy looked at her in sharp confusion. "What withdrawals?" She snapped her head toward him. Don't start." "Don't start what?" I placed the journal on the table. Cheryl's eyes dropped to it and stayed there. "I found Dad's box at Westfield," I said. Nobody spoke. I opened the journal to the marked page and slid it toward the center. He knew, I said. He knew money was being moved. He knew the watch had something hidden in it. He knew enough to leave a letter for me and keep the real documents where no one could touch them. Troy's mouth opened slightly. No, that's not... Not what? I asked. Not true? Because there are dates. There are copies. There are bank records. Cheryl pushed her chair back. This is ridiculous. Mr. Harlan held up a hand. Mrs. Harlan, I need you to explain your involvement. The room went still in a different way then, not tense, exposed. I was helping him, Cheryl said carefully. With what? I asked. With his affairs. By withdrawing repair money? Her eyes flickered. Troy turned to her sharply. What is she talking about? She ignored him and looked at me. Your father was confused toward the end. He wanted things handled simply. He asked me to help organize bills. That's a lie, I said. Her gaze hardened. You always thought you were the only one he trusted. No, I said, my voice trembling now despite my best effort. I knew he trusted me because I helped him without asking what I'd get in return. For the first time, Cheryl looked angry enough to stop pretending. You think you're so noble, she said. Do you know how hard it was living in this house with his ghosts? With his rules? With everyone expecting me to be grateful for crumbs? Then leave, I said. A sharp silence. Troy stood abruptly. Okay, enough. Tell me what's really going on. I looked at him for a long time. He was my brother, but in that moment he looked like a stranger in an expensive shirt. You helped her, I said. No, I didn't. Dad wrote it down. He blinked. Wrote what down? I turned the journal around and read aloud the line I had dreaded reading since I found it. Troy met with Cheryl and the insurance man on June 12. He says we should be practical. Troy's face changed so fast it was almost painful to watch. Dana's head snapped toward him. What insurance man? His mouth opened, then closed. I was only trying to help. With what? Linda barked. What exactly were you helping with? Troy looked at Cheryl, and I saw the moment he realized she was not going to save him. She said the accounts were a mess, he muttered. She said the house needed to be sold if we were going to split things fairly. Fairly? I repeated. By taking Dad's repair money? I didn't know she was taking it. You knew enough, I said. He stood there, jaw tight, and for a second I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered my father's note. He is being used. And maybe that was true. That did not make him innocent. Mr. Harlan placed 2 more papers on the table. There's more. Your father amended the trust 2 weeks before he passed. The house remains in the family, with specific protections for Maya. There is also a scholarship directive requiring a portion of the estate's non-house assets to be placed in a memorial fund in your mother's name. Cheryl's face turned blank. What non-house assets? She demanded. Mr. Harlan didn't answer immediately. He just looked down at his notes. Your father had a private account, he said finally. Funded over several years. It was separate from the repair fund. The room erupted again. How much? Troy asked. Mr. Harlan answered calmly. Enough to matter. That was the moment Cheryl stopped pretending. She laughed. Not a happy laugh. A dry, ugly sound. Of course he did, she said. Of course he kept the real money hidden. It wasn't hidden, I said. It was protected. She turned on me with a glare so sharp it could have cut glass. You don't know anything about protecting a family. Then tell us, I said. Tell everyone what you were doing in Dad's room before he passed. Her face froze. Paige looked up for the first time in 10 minutes. Cheryl said nothing. I kept going because I knew there was no going back now. You were looking for the watch, weren't you? Because Dad hid the journal where no one could find it, and you thought the watch held the key to the rest of the money. Her eyes flashed. Troy stared at her. Cheryl? She said quickly. No, that's not true. But Paige suddenly set her phone down and spoke in a small, careful voice. It is true, she said. Cheryl whirled toward her. Paige. Paige swallowed. You told me there was money in the watch. You said if we found it before Maya, we could make sure Dad's wishes didn't get twisted. Linda sucked in a breath. Dana looked at Troy like she had never seen him before. Troy's face went pale. You told Paige that? Cheryl's voice sharpened. Paige, don't you dare. But Paige was already crying. You said it was fine because Maya would just keep everything anyway. And suddenly the room wasn't just tense, it was collapsing. Troy turned to Cheryl, fury rising fast and ugly. You used me? Lower your voice, she hissed. Answer me. She stood up too, shoulders tight. I did what I had to do. To steal from Dad? I was surviving. By stealing from Dad? I repeated. She looked at me with a coldness I will never forget. Your father knew how to make sure everyone needed him. He had the whole family dancing while he kept the good parts locked away. I felt my hands shake, but my voice stayed steady. You're lying. Am I? Yes. Because he wrote me a letter. He knew exactly who you were. Something in her face changed at that. Not shame, not regret, panic. Mr. Harlan stepped in before anyone else could speak. Mrs. Harlan, I need to remind you that any further attempts to access estate funds without authorization may be considered unlawful. She stared at him, then at the papers on the table, then at me, and that was when she made her final mistake. You think you won, she said softly. You have no idea what I know. The room went quiet. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. My stomach turned. She tossed it on the table. Your father was not as innocent as you all think. I didn't touch it. What is that? Troy asked. A copy of something your father wanted hidden, she said. Something he told me to keep safe. From who? I asked. Her eyes locked on mine. From you. That one word hit harder than everything else. I opened the envelope with numb fingers and pulled out a folded letter. It was Dad's handwriting. My name was on the first line. My hands trembled as I read. Maya, if Cheryl gives you this, it means things have gotten worse than I hoped. There is something you need to understand about your mother's final months and about the money that disappeared after she passed. I made mistakes. Some were mine, some were not. I kept quiet because I thought silence would protect you from the truth. It did not. It only gave other people time to twist it. Ask Cheryl about the hospital forms. Ask her why she was involved in the signatures. Ask her what she did when she thought nobody was looking. I am sorry. Dad. My vision blurred. The hospital forms. My mother had been sick for months before she passed. I was young then, but not so young that I didn't remember the confusion, the rushing, the signatures, the adults whispering in hallways. I had never thought much about it because grief can make memory soft around the edges. But Dad's letter turned every soft edge into a blade. I looked at Cheryl. What did you do? She closed her eyes. Troy whispered. Cheryl? Her mouth tightened. Your mother had insurance paperwork. What kind of paperwork? I asked. She wanted the policy changed. There was a beneficiary update. My chest felt hollow. What did you do? I told her she should wait until your father could review it. That's not an answer. Cheryl's eyes opened, and for the first time she looked tired instead of angry. At the hospital, she said. Your mother was weak. She asked me to help with some forms. I thought she understood what she was signing. Later, I found out she had changed the beneficiary on one of the accounts. The room was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. And? I asked. And I corrected it. Nobody moved. Linda's face went white. You changed it back? Cheryl lifted her chin. I was trying to protect the family. No, I said. You were trying to protect yourself. She looked straight at me, and something ugly and desperate passed over her face. You don't know what it was like. Then tell us. She let out a shaky breath. When your mother died, there were debts, medical bills. Your father couldn't manage everything alone. I stepped in. I made sure the house stayed afloat. And you took money? I said. I borrowed. You lied. I kept things from falling apart. I almost laughed. By forging signatures? Troy stared at her in horror. What? She turned on him immediately. I did what had to be done. That's not what Dad wrote, I said, and my voice was quieter than I expected. He wrote that you took advantage when he was grieving. Her face tightened. Mr. Harlan, who had stayed unusually still through all this, carefully gathered the papers. At this point, I strongly advise everyone to stop speaking informally and let the matter be handled through proper legal channels. Cheryl gave a short, bitter laugh. So that's it. You all gang up on me and call it justice? No, I said, standing so slowly my knees nearly gave out. Justice is making sure the truth gets out. Her eyes hardened. The truth? Yes. You really want the truth? I did not answer because I already knew I was about to hear something I didn't want. She looked at me for a long, ugly moment and then said, Your father knew about the forms. He knew I signed one for your mother because he was there when I did it. Everything stopped. Troy frowned. What are you talking about? Cheryl's voice shook now, but she kept going. Your mother was too weak to sign at the end. Your father asked me to help because he didn't want her stressed. He was there. He watched. He let it happen. I stared at her. That's a lie, I whispered. Is it? She said. Because your father wrote that letter after he already knew. The room spun a little. She pointed at the envelope in my hand. Read the rest. I did, and there it was. One line I had somehow missed in the shock. I let Cheryl sign because I believed the update was temporary. That was my mistake. I looked up slowly. Even now, with all the anger in the room, even now with the evidence laid bare, I could not tell whether my father had been protecting Cheryl, protecting us, or protecting his own guilt, or maybe all three. That was the twist nobody expected. Not me, not Troy, not Linda, not even Mr. Harlan. The man we had all been accusing and defending in turns had not been pure. He had been human, complicated, careless in one way, loving in another, afraid in the middle. And somehow that made the whole thing hurt more. Cheryl saw it on my face. For the first time all day, she softened. Not enough to redeem her. Not nearly enough. But enough to make me understand she was no longer the strongest person in the room. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said quietly. No, I answered. You meant for it to go far enough that you got what you wanted. Her mouth tightened, but she didn't deny it. That afternoon, the legal process moved fast. The trust was frozen pending review. The bank flagged the questionable withdrawals. A forensic accountant was brought in. Cheryl's signature showed up on documents that should never have had her name on them. Troy's involvement came out too, though less severe and much more humiliating because he had tried so hard to sound innocent while standing in the middle of wrongdoing. Dana left him that same night. I didn't even know until she came by the house in tears to return his keys and say, I married a man, not a puppet. Troy sat alone on the porch after that, staring at the dark yard like the trees had answers he didn't. Paige, to my surprise, was the first one to tell the truth fully. She came to me the next morning with red eyes and said Cheryl had been using her to distract Dad during one of the final weeks while she searched his room. Paige had thought she was helping with organizing, but she had started to realize Cheryl was lying and had gotten scared. She showed me the texts. She showed me the voice messages. She showed me enough to confirm what my father had suspected. Cheryl had been working around us for months. Paige didn't do it out of kindness. She did it because she was afraid and because she was finally tired of being part of someone else's scheme. Even so, the truth mattered. And then there was the watch. When everything else came out, I finally opened the paper Dad had hidden inside it. It was a short letter, written years earlier. Maya, if you found this, then I trust you more than I trusted my own fear. The watch belonged to my father before me. He gave it to me the day I left home with nothing but a toolbox and a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. I am leaving the real inheritance to the one person who still believes truth should cost something. The money matters, but not as much as this. I want you to use it to build something that outlasts this family's mistakes. Use it for Mom. Use it for the children who need a better start than we had. Do not let greed turn our pain into a habit. I loved your mother in a way I never learned how to say well. I loved you and your brother too, even when I failed you both. Tell Troy I was hard on him because I hoped he'd become better than me. I was wrong to leave him guessing. And tell Cheryl nothing unless a court requires it. Dad. I read that letter in the kitchen with my coffee gone cold beside me, and I cried again. But this time it was different, because now I understood the inheritance. It was not the watch. It was not the money. It was not even the house. It was the chance to decide what kind of person I would be with the truth in my hands. The legal fight took months. It was messy and painful and expensive. Cheryl tried to argue that she had acted under stress and confusion. Troy tried to say he had misunderstood what he was signing. The accountant uncovered enough irregularities to force a settlement. Money was returned. The house stayed in the trust. The scholarship fund was created in my mother's name exactly as my father wanted. The bank records, the notes, the copies of signatures, all of it became part of the official record. And the consequences came in realistic ways, which somehow felt more satisfying than anything dramatic. Cheryl lost access to the account she had tried to control. She moved out when the trust restrictions made it impossible to keep living off the family property. Troy's reputation took a hit that no charm could fix. Dana filed for separation and, from what I heard later, protected what little she could of her own finances. Linda, who had spent half the time complaining and the other half stirring the pot, suddenly had nothing useful to say once the documents spoke louder than gossip. Paige disappeared into her own life and never again pretended she wanted to play family games. As for me, I became the trustee, which was not an honor I wanted, but it was the one my father had left me. The first thing I did was take the old watch to a repair shop. The man behind the counter smiled when he saw it. "Old piece," he said. "Runs on memory more than parts." I smiled back despite myself. "Yeah," I said. "I think that was the point." When he called a week later to say it was fixed, I went to pick it up alone. I held it in my hand for a long time before putting it on. It felt lighter than I remembered, but somehow more powerful, like something finished surviving. I wore it to court, to the bank, to the scholarship meeting, and on the day I signed the papers that created the fund in my mother's name. I also wore it the afternoon Troy came by and asked to talk. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just hollowed out. The loud part of him had gone missing. He stood on the front step and said, "I was wrong." I waited. He swallowed hard. "I know that doesn't fix anything." "No," I said. He nodded, staring at the porch boards. I let her pull me in. I wanted to believe I was getting something I'd been denied. "You were getting your own choices," I said. "You just didn't like them." That stung him. I could tell. He nodded again. Dad was right about me, wasn't he? I thought about lying. I thought about protecting the little bit of pride he had left. But my father's letter echoed in my head. "Tell the truth even when it costs you something." "Yes," I said softly. He was worried you'd choose easy over right. Troy closed his eyes. For a second, I almost saw the little boy I grew up with. The one who used to follow Dad into the garage and ask 10 questions while I watched quietly from the doorway. He had not always been greedy. He had just become the kind of man who was too easily impressed by shortcuts. "Can I ever fix this?" he asked. I looked at him a long time. Then I said, "Not all of it, but maybe you can stop making it worse." He nodded once, tears in his eyes that he didn't bother hiding. That was the closest thing to redemption I was willing to give him. Cheryl never apologized. Not really. Years later, she sent a letter that tried to sound reflective, but it still circled around her own pain instead of naming what she had done. I didn't answer it. Some people only become sorry when life stops rewarding them. Cheryl was one of those people. Troy, to his credit, eventually got himself together. Not immediately, not beautifully, but eventually. He got a job in another town, started paying back what he could, and sent money every year to the scholarship fund without fail. No grand speeches, no forgiveness tour, just steady, quiet effort. I respected that more than I could say. And me? I used the scholarship fund the way Dad wanted. We gave grants to kids whose parents had fallen behind, to students who needed a break, to young people who were trying to build a better life without any guarantee they'd get one. We named it after my mom, but I kept Dad's watch in the office drawer. Because every time I opened that drawer and saw it sitting there, scratched and stubborn and still working, I remembered that the most valuable things in a family are often hidden in the least impressive places. People in town still talk about the old watch sometimes. They say it was a strange thing to build a family fight around. They say maybe my father should have just left a normal will and avoided the drama. Maybe. But I think he knew something most of us didn't. He knew that the real inheritance is never just what gets signed over in a document. It is what gets revealed when people think they can take advantage. It is what remains after the greed strips everything else away. It is the proof of who stood for truth when it would have been easier to stay quiet. My father left me more than money. He left me the chance to stop the lies, and he left me the watch with the letter inside it. The one thing everyone fought over because they thought it was worth something on its own. They were wrong. The watch was just the container. The letter was the inheritance. And the truth inside it changed everything.